"Joshua, it's not what you think," was roughly what my wife Beverly managed to utter before I seized her paramour and forcibly escorted him outside to my Hummer. It marked a day of unexpected revelations that significantly altered the course of my life. Today, I'm prepared to recount this tale. I go by Joshua, and I've been married to Beverly for a solid 18 years. Together, we've raised our 18-year-old daughter, Ruby, ensuring she lacked for nothing. My daughter has now embarked on her freshman year of college. I remain employed, and Beverly continues to oversee our household. Our story began when we were both 20, and just 2 months into our relationship, we received the unexpected news of Beverly's pregnancy. My reaction was surprisingly optimistic, although I was uncertain about the challenges ahead. Swiftly, I proposed to Beverly, and we exchanged vows. Times were undeniably tough. Neither of us possessed a formal education, and Beverly took on the role of managing our home. With Ruby's arrival, our financial situation took a further hit as I lost my job, leaving us without a source of income. To make ends meet, we had to resort to taking out a loan during this trying period. Our living conditions were cramped, to say the least, occupying a meager 15 square meter space within my parents' home, and we were uncertain about our future. By the time Ruby turned 4, my employment prospects improved, providing us with a more stable income. This positive turn enabled us to move out of my parents' place and secure a small yet comfortable home on the city's outskirts. In my pursuit of ensuring a better upbringing for Ruby, I sought additional employment, working long hours during the day at my primary job and dedicating my evenings to a secondary occupation. It proved to be a demanding period, and I'm relieved that we managed to overcome those challenges. I worked diligently during the day at my primary job, and in the evenings, I dedicated myself to my secondary employment. This phase was undeniably testing, but we eventually triumphed over it. We successfully cleared all our debts, acquired our house, and 2 years ago, I fulfilled my dream of purchasing a Hummer, a goal we had been diligently saving for. Moreover, we set aside funds for Ruby's college education. I made strides in my career, a feat I once considered unattainable without formal education. However, through hard work and displaying initiative, I garnered the support and encouragement of my superiors, eventually ascending to a high-ranking position. My current income adequately sustains our family. While we didn't lead an extravagant lifestyle, we secured everything essential, with the most crucial aspect being my daughter Ruby's well-being. I had always believed I was raising my daughter correctly. However, my stress levels escalated when she introduced her first boyfriend, Andrew, into our home. He attended the same college as Ruby, but from the moment he set foot in my house, I harbored an unexplainable dislike for him. I couldn't articulate this sentiment, but I felt my daughter deserved someone better. I often wondered, what did she see in him? Before revealing her boyfriend to us, Ruby had been secretly dating Andrew for 3 months. She confided in Beverly that she was apprehensive about my reaction, fearing my anger, and regrettably, that's precisely what transpired. I concealed my animosity toward Andrew. On the contrary, I was cordial and engaging. I frequently posed questions and maintained supportive conversations with him, yet I sensed that Andrew was attempting to connect with someone else. Nevertheless, each time he crossed our threshold, I made it a point to approach Ruby and engage in discussions with her. One such conversation occurred the day preceding the event in question. "Dad, I'd rather not delve into this topic," she remarked. As soon as I opened the door, Ruby stated, "Andrew is an average guy." "I'm not seeking your viewpoint. I have a different perspective," I responded. "I'm not scolding you. I just can't comprehend what you see in him. He lacks any prospects, doesn't even hold a job, and I've heard he performs poorly in his studies, although that's essentially his only path to a better life," I remarked. "Dad, did you ever need reasons to love Mom?" Ruby countered. "I'm not implying that you did, but Mom believed in me and I felt assured. I had a passion back then, but sadly, I don't perceive that same drive in Andrew. That's because Mom got pregnant with me and you had to take action. You don't even have an education and you're discussing Andrew. We've been together for just 4 months. I'm not suggesting I want to spend my entire life with him. Perhaps I'll end things with him in a few days, but currently, everything about him suits me," Ruby said. "But Ruby, before I could continue," she interrupted, saying, "Enough, Dad. Drop the subject. I'm tired of it." May I ask one last question? All right, but I reserve the right not to respond if I dislike it, Ruby replied. Very well. Has anything happened between you and Andrew? I asked. Yes, and not just once. I'm 18 years old, so I make decisions about my body, Ruby declared, leaving me taken aback by her candid response. When did this occur? Why didn't you inform us? This is already the second question. We agreed on just one question, and besides, Mom is already aware, so that's enough, Dad. Good night. I need to prepare for exams, Ruby asserted, and I wished her a good night, departing feeling highly dissatisfied. Determined to uncover the truth, I proceeded directly to Beverly. Upon entering our bedroom, I found Beverly reclining on the bed, engrossed in a book. I shared the news without revealing my intentions. Honey, do you know what I just found out? What's wrong, dear? She asked playfully. I mentioned that our daughter had an intimate relationship with a guy named James, or Andrew, if I recall correctly. My wife replied, Yes, I know. Ruby told me, but she strongly asked you not to mention it. However, she confessed everything herself. In that moment, I forgot what I had initially wanted to say. Beverly's reaction irritated me. I couldn't fathom why she was defending Andrew. We ended up arguing and went to sleep in silence, turning away from each other. I couldn't understand why my wife disagreed with me and saw Andrew as a good person. Her defense of him intensified when Andrew began frequently staying overnight at our place. Unfortunately, Ruby started inviting him not just for the evening or the day, but for overnight stays, sharing Ruby's room with him. I assumed Beverly was defending Andrew and allowing him to stay overnight because she felt sorry for him. Andrew had grown up in a foster family, and the living conditions there were less than favorable. While I sympathized with Andrew for his difficult life and the loss of his parents at a young age, I still held reservations about him. One evening, I arrived home late, around 11 p.m., and saw Andrew's sneakers on the doorstep when he shouldn't have been there at that hour. I had clearly set a rule that there should be no strangers in the house when I returned from work, usually by 8 p.m. As it was past that time, Andrew should have either left or been in the process of leaving. To my surprise, Beverly had allowed Andrew to stay without seeking my permission. Following that incident, we seemed to argue almost daily, primarily due to Andrew's presence. After unsuccessful conversations with my daughter and Beverly, I struggled to sleep. It felt as if my family was turning away from me, prioritizing a stranger in our home over my concerns and wishes. Whenever I returned home, there was always something to eat. However, on the days when Andrew stayed overnight, I'd arrive home to find leftovers because Andrew had a hearty appetite and often consumed my food. These little incidents were beginning to grate on my nerves. It had been a month since I discovered my daughter was dating Andrew, and he had already become a permanent resident in my house, partaking in my meals and pursuing a relationship with my daughter. The day following the argument with Beverly and Ruby, I went to work feeling down. Ruby was preparing for an exam and Beverly was managing household affairs. As I drove to work, I couldn't help but ponder. If I were to evict this guy from my house now, my wife and daughter would never forgive me. What should I do instead? I never found an answer to my question, but I started my workday with vigor. I completed all my morning tasks and readied myself for a meeting where I needed to present a new project. Richard, my boss, reminded me, Joshua, you haven't forgotten about our meeting in an hour and a half, have you? Is everything prepared? I reassured him, No, sir, I'm fully prepared. But suddenly, a realization struck me. I had left all the necessary documents at home. How could I have forgotten them? In a panic, I rushed to my assistant, informing her that I needed to leave for approximately 30 minutes and asked her to cover for me. She agreed, saying, Certainly, Mr. Joshua, I'll handle it. I sprinted to my car and sped toward home. While en route, I attempted to reach Beverly, hoping she could retrieve the documents from the living room and bring them to me quickly. Regrettably, she didn't answer her phone. I decided to call Ruby next, assuming she might already be at home. Dad, are you out of your mind? I'm still waiting for my turn, and you're calling and distracting me. I told you I would call as soon as I finished the exam, she scolded before hanging up. Aware that time was slipping away, I drove at a pace exceeding the speed limit. I couldn't afford to mess up this meeting because its approval meant an immediate bonus, a salary increase, and the possibility of advancing in my position. As I arrived home, I glanced at the clock, which displayed 1:15 p.m. Darn it, I've only been driving for 30 minutes to get back home, I thought, Realizing the meeting was scheduled for 2:15 p.m., I needed to swiftly enter the house and then head back to work. The front door was unexpectedly locked, which surprised me since it's typically open during the day, and I never carried keys to avoid misplacing them. I opted to check the back entrance, but it was also securely shut. Frustrated, I approached the kitchen window and heard loud music emanating from the second floor, indicating that Beverly was cleaning while enjoying some music. I contemplated entering through the window, but it presented a challenge as it was partially ajar. To gain access, I had to stretch across to reach the handle. Fortunately, my reach didn't fail me, and I successfully managed to shift it, allowing me to climb inside. Upon entering, the first thing that struck me was the disarray. The house remained in the same state as it had been in the morning when I left for work. As loud music continued playing upstairs, I decided to head in that direction. However, I suddenly noticed Beverly's phone resting on the nightstand. It displayed 3 missed calls from me, and beneath them, I noticed messages from Andrew. Unfortunately, I couldn't read them as the phone was locked, leaving me with an unsettling feeling. Thoughts swirled in my mind about why this guy had my wife's contacts and whether this was becoming a normal occurrence. I pondered as I made my way to the second floor. The loud music made it challenging to discern anything initially, but as I ascended, I began to hear unmistakable sounds. Upon reaching the second-floor corridor, I distinctly heard moans. The door to our bedroom was partially ajar, and the music mixed with moans and rhythmic sounds. I approached the door cautiously, and the first thing I spotted was Beverly's lace pants, the ones she typically wore on our anniversary. I moved closer, and the scene inside the room became clearer. I peered cautiously into the room, trying to comprehend the situation. There, I saw my wife and a young man in a compromising position. From behind, I couldn't immediately identify him as Andrew. They remained oblivious to my presence, engrossed in their activities. The emotions I experienced at that moment were beyond words. Swiftly, I took out my phone and recorded a 30-second video just as a precaution. Subsequently, I silently approached from behind. When I was as close as possible, I grabbed the guy by the leg and forcefully flung him off the bed. As he tumbled to the floor, I finally recognized him as Andrew. He remained there for a few moments, struggling to grasp what had just occurred. Swiftly, I retrieved my phone and captured a photograph of his bewildered face. Simultaneously, Beverly had spotted me. I seized Andrew by his leg and began pulling him across the floor. In that moment, Beverly let out a frantic cry, "Joshua, it's not what you think!" As I continued to drag the young man downstairs, the music abruptly ceased. Beverly rushed out of the room, pleading, "Andrew is not at fault. Andrew is not guilty. It's all on me. Leave him be." Yet I paid no heed to her pleas, and Andrew, defenseless, had no choice against someone weighing 110 kilograms. I forcefully opened the front door, while Beverly, clad in a robe, attempted to stop me as I dragged Andrew along the ground. However, I simply maneuvered around her and headed for the car. When she tried to block my path to the vehicle, I warned her, "Leave, or he'll truly get hurt right here." She fled. I ushered Andrew into the back seat of my Hummer and cautioned him, "Don't move, understand?" Andrew nodded, indicating his comprehension. Once I closed the door, I noticed my neighbor tending to his lawn, his expression one of shock and surprise. I reassured him, "Anthony, don't worry. It's a learning experience. Everything will be fine with the lad." I called out to my neighbor and was about to enter the car when my wife emerged from the house, berating me. "Joshua, if you leave now, I'll call the police for kidnapping Andrew." Realizing my wife had shed her fear, I turned to Andrew and asked, "Dude, did I kidnap you?" Andrew promptly denied it, and I repeated, "See? Now shout the same to my wife, with whom you were involved in my bedroom today." He complied, confirming that everything was fine, and we departed. After about 5 minutes on the road, Beverly began calling me, followed by a call from my boss. My work was now a distant memory, so I simply silenced the notifications. 5 minutes later, Andrew mustered the courage to inquire, "Are you planning to kill me?" "Why? I have something more intriguing in mind," I replied. After 40 minutes, we arrived at the college's main entrance where my daughter Ruby was taking exams and would soon finish. "Get out," I commanded Andrew. He seemed to want to say something, but my firm tone compelled me to reiterate, "Exit immediately, step out and stay put. If you move, it'll only get worse. Understand?" Andrew nodded and cautiously opened the door, stepping onto the street. I swiftly positioned myself at a distance to observe. Andrew stood there, trembling in fear, as he covered his lower body with his hands. In my thoughts, I couldn't help but find him a hero in seducing my wife. He could have chosen to run away or refuse to exit the car, but he followed my instructions. After all, who was I to make him do anything? It amused me that he complied. After 3 minutes, a crowd of students gathered around Andrew, curious about the unusual scene. Some students began laughing and tossing paper scraps at him, while others took pictures, and a few stood by, observing like me. Suddenly, Ruby emerged from the main entrance, wearing no smile. Most likely she had already called Beverly, who had painted me as a tyrant father kidnapping her boyfriend. The absurdity was that it turned out to be true. Beverly had indeed portrayed me as a monster to Ruby. I hurried over to Ruby to prevent her from approaching Andrew. At that moment, Andrew started yelling for Ruby, trying to get her attention. As I approached Ruby, she began to distance herself from me, moving in the opposite direction. Simultaneously, Andrew attempted to rush toward Ruby, but a young man intercepted him, knocking him to the ground. Someone had called the police on Andrew for appearing in such a state near an educational institution. I chased after Ruby, shouting that I would explain everything, but she quickened her pace, calling for help. Eventually, she started running, desperately seeking assistance. I realized it was futile. Upon returning to the car, I noticed a police car where they were placing Andrew. A smirk crossed my face. Inside the car, I decided to re-enable notifications and noticed a message from Ruby. Never approach me again. There were over 6 missed calls from Beverly and a staggering 23 missed calls from my boss. This situation was dire. Feeling lost, I sought solace in a bar, where I remained until morning. My night began with beer and concluded with whiskey. I struck up a conversation with some guys at the bar and shared my story. They were initially incredulous, but when I showed them the photos, they were genuinely shocked. The following morning, I made the responsible decision not to drive and called a taxi to take me to a hostel. I spent 2 days there purchasing a pen and notebook and contemplated my next steps. I composed a brief message to my boss, explaining the situation. He seemed to grasp the situation and advised me to get in touch once everything settled, prompting me to power off my phone. On the second day, I finally devised a plan, carefully considering all potential risks. It was time to return home, with my primary objective being to maintain a good relationship with my daughter. I understood that she would initially oppose me, but I held out hope that over time, she would come to understand my perspective. However, my journey home took an unexpected turn. Just 500 meters away, the police pulled me over, and I was escorted to the police station. To my astonishment, Beverly had filed a report against me, alleging that I had broken into the house during the day, initiated violence against her, and subsequently abducted Andrew, forcing him to stand near the college under duress. What shocked me even more was Ruby's statement, echoing the same allegations. Initially, I was bewildered by these accusations, promptly demanding legal representation. On the same day, I submitted a detailed account of the actual events, attaching evidence such as video footage and photos. I clarified that Andrew had willingly accompanied me, and my neighbor, who happened to be watering his lawn at the time, corroborated this fact. He attested that Andrew displayed no resistance and heard no threats. Furthermore, my neighbor noted that I appeared calm, and he had never witnessed anything suspicious. While Andrew was placed under arrest, my statement was accepted. Later, Beverly and Ruby arrived accompanied by a lawyer. They had been summoned due to their conflicting testimonies, lacking any supporting evidence. Ruby avoided eye contact with me, while Beverly shot me a disdainful look, deeply hurting me to see my wife treating me this way. The lawyer informed me that Ruby was initially unaware of any connection between Beverly and Andrew, but this would come to light during the interrogations. As my lawyer had predicted, Ruby's viewpoint changed dramatically when she emerged into the hallway, embracing me tightly and offering apologies. She revealed that her mother had painted an entirely different narrative, and in her anger, Ruby had initially agreed to provide false testimony as a means of retribution. However, her stance quickly shifted upon viewing the incriminating photos. I harbored no ill will towards Ruby. I was simply relieved that she believed me. Several months later, our divorce was finalized in court, and we sold the house, dividing the proceeds between us. Beverly was obliged to compensate me significantly for her false accusations. Andrew was released, but he faced expulsion from college and had to leave due to the ridicule he endured when the truth emerged. My understanding boss rescheduled the hearings. During this period, I made amendments and enhancements to my work, presented it successfully, and received a bonus, double salary, and a well-deserved promotion. I downsized to a smaller house and settled for a more modest car. Ruby chose to remain in my life, at least until she completed her college studies, while Beverly moved in with her parents and sought employment to fulfill her compensation obligations. Understandably, Ruby had no desire to communicate with Beverly, a sentiment I fully supported. Overall, life gradually returned to normal. Looking back, I want every listener to comprehend that unexpected situations can arise in life, and one must be prepared to make difficult decisions. As for regret, do I have any about what transpired? For a while, yes, but now I realize it's a great opportunity for a fresh start. I allocate more time for myself, connect with Jim, and most importantly, I prioritize my daughter. I can confidently say that things are going well for me, and I hope my story holds valuable lessons for you, offering something important to take away. I wouldn't wish this on anyone, so I wish everyone the best of luck.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned, and let's dive in.
Let's begin with the key individuals involved. Myself, my former spouse Pepper, the primary target for revenge, her boyfriend Steve, the secondary target for revenge, Steve's ex-wife Maria, my partner in the revenge plot, my daughter Sarah, and my friend Jason, my collaborator in the revenge scheme. Now that we have introduced the cast, let's delve into some contextual details. Pepper and I had a tumultuous marriage. Reflecting back, I realized that I was deeply in love with her, but it has become apparent that she was more drawn to the financial stability and convenience I offered. Prior to our marriage, she already had a son named Bob, who had a long-standing obsession with pills. And I had another son, whose name is inconsequential, whom I had full custody of. During our marriage, Sarah was born. I made sincere efforts to salvage our relationship, but eventually, the strain became insurmountable. We made the decision to separate, and due to the nature of my job, which required occasional travel, as well as my custody of my son, I relocated to my hometown in a different state. This move allowed my parents to assist me, and I retained an apartment in the town where Pepper and Sarah resided to maintain a strong connection with my daughter. During this period, I sought the assistance of my best friend Jason, who happens to be a lawyer with his own firm. I requested him to draft a child support agreement between Pepper and me. It's essential to clarify that this agreement exclusively addressed child support and did not encompass custody arrangements, visitation schedules, or any other related matters. Consequently, for approximately a year, our arrangement was as follows. I spent a month with Sarah while my parents looked after my other son, and then I dedicated a month to my son. Approximately 1 year later, I found it financially challenging to sustain 2 households, and Pepper expressed her desire to relocate to her hometown, which was in a different state, but closer to my location. Consequently, I relinquished the apartment, and she made the move. We continued in this revised arrangement for a couple more years. Pepper and I maintained an amicable relationship, even making attempts to reconcile our romance on several occasions, although these efforts proved futile. Despite my enduring affection for her, we couldn't reach a consensus on critical matters such as our choice of residence. I compelled myself to move forward, prompting me to embark on new dating experiences. In contrast, she had started dating almost immediately after my departure. Though my love for her persisted, our relationship gradually evolved into more of a friendship rather than that of husband and wife. Eventually, she crossed paths with Steve. I wasn't privy to much information about him except for his profession as a certified ethical hacker, which becomes significant later on. While they were in the dating phase, she would keep me informed about their outings, even texting me on the day they became particularly close. It pained me deeply, and in retrospect, I suspect this was what she intended. Nevertheless, I endeavored to fulfill the role of a supportive friend and a trustworthy confidant. Unexpectedly, Pepper informed me that she and Steve had ended their relationship after 6 months of dating. Suddenly, she realized that she was deeply in love with me. Since it was the start of summer, she packed her bags and traveled to my state. The plan was for them to spend the summer with me and assess whether they liked it here or not. I must say, we had an incredible summer together. All the children got along harmoniously, with even Bob finding enjoyment here. Consequently, Pepper officially announced that we were back together and they were moving in with me. We proceeded to enroll my daughter in school, and she even joined a Pee-wee cheerleading team for the summer, forging some wonderful friendships and relishing her time here. However, a predicament arose. Pepper still retained an apartment filled with her furniture and possessions. I offered to use my truck and assist her in relocating everything, but she insisted that she and Bob could manage it themselves. Thus, they embarked on the task of packing their belongings and making their way to their new abode. As you can likely imagine, events took an unexpected turn. After being home for just 3 days, Pepper delivered a shocking revelation. She firmly declared that she would not move under any circumstances and that she and Steve were deeply in love and planning to cohabit. To say I was devastated falls short of capturing the intensity of my emotions. I couldn't fathom why she had put me through this ordeal. What made matters worse was that she left it to me to convey the heart-wrenching news to Sarah. As I broke the news to her, the devastated expression on her face transformed my initial hurt into anger. Sarah eventually broke down and began pleading to remain with me, and in the process, she began revealing everything. She shared details about how her mom would depart with Steve for days, leaving Bob in charge. Sarah had to acquire the skill of cooking for herself when she was just 8 years old. This was because Bob would spend the family's money on pills and remain high most of the time. If Bob wasn't the one in charge, Pepper would entrust her niece, who had multiple felony convictions, to look after Sarah. Sarah also recounted her first encounter with Steve. He visited their home, barely offering a greeting, and then he and her mom vanished into the bedroom, engaging in loud intimacy. Sarah was outside the door, crying her eyes out, but they paid no attention to her and continued. It was through this distressing experience that my 8-year-old daughter became aware of such intimacy, and even after 7 years, she is still undergoing counseling to recover from these traumatic incidents. At this point, my initial anger has escalated into sheer rage. I promptly informed Pepper that there was absolutely no way Sarah was returning to that situation, and I was fully prepared to fiercely protect my daughter. In response, Pepper took immediate action and scheduled an emergency hearing in her state, with the intention of compelling Sarah to return. I had to act swiftly, but I successfully secured legal representation and, fortunately, easily won the hearing, despite Pepper arriving late and offering her disability as an excuse to the judge. The judge concurred that, given the absence of a custody agreement and the troubling allegations I had assembled, it was in Sarah's best interest to remain with me for the time being. I had won the initial battle, albeit briefly. Within an hour of the hearing, my inbox was inundated with phishing emails and text messages. I also started receiving requests for password resets and multi-factor authentication codes from my bank, Facebook, Reddit, and other accounts. I had no doubt that Steve was behind these malicious actions. The very next day, Jason phoned me with troubling news. His law firm's website, email, and phone systems had all been hacked. Given his obligation to report the incident to the court and his involvement in a relatively high-profile case, the FBI became involved. To say I was furious would be an understatement. These two individuals had not only upended my life, but had also harmed my daughter and sullied my lifelong friend's reputation. It was time for them to face the consequences, and I was resolute in ensuring they paid a steep price. I became a man on a mission, dedicating hours to scrutinizing the backgrounds of Steve and Pepper, scouring for any incriminating evidence. My efforts yielded significant results with Pepper. I unearthed social media posts of her frequently staying out late drinking, which coincided with Sarah's frequent absences and tardiness at school. I discovered numerous pictures of her engaged in enjoyable activities with 2 unfamiliar children. Additionally, I found neighbors who were willing to testify that Sarah had to plead for food because she was often left under the care of either Bob or the felon. I knew I possessed compelling evidence against Pepper. Conversely, Steve had implemented extra security measures to safeguard his accounts, making it challenging for me to uncover any incriminating information about him, which was driving me to frustration. Then it occurred to me to check his LinkedIn profile. My intuition proved correct. While there was limited information available on his profile, I stumbled upon Maria, his ex-wife, among his connections. I initiated contact with her, and she readily accepted my connection request. Maria and I quickly forged a strong friendship. She held a deep resentment toward Pepper, and rightfully so, as both of them had abandoned their children, mirroring my daughter's situation. Maria provided me with invaluable insights. To keep it concise, Maria and Steve had recently finalized their divorce. In their custody agreement, Steve emerged with ownership of the house, car, bank account, and the majority of their savings, while his child support payments were notably lower. Maria willingly relinquished this financial advantage in exchange for maintaining control and ensuring her children's well-being. They had a comprehensive custody arrangement with stringent rules that Steve had to adhere to. Any violation of these rules would result in severe consequences for him. According to the agreement, he would be compelled to sell the house and share the proceeds with Maria. Moreover, his child support obligations would double, leading to his financial downfall. Interestingly, Steve had not blocked Maria on social media, and he frequently sent messages boasting about his supposedly superior life without her. Many of these messages even featured pictures of Pepper. Maria and I compared our discoveries, shared our evidence, and collaboratively devised a plan. Now, it was time for retribution. Initially, I joined forces with Jason, who promptly informed the FBI investigator about the hacking attempts I had experienced. We suspected that the same individual was behind these incidents. The investigator acted swiftly, reaching out to me. I provided all the information I had gathered and conveyed my suspicions about the perpetrator. He then posed an intriguing question. Did I happen to know where Steve was employed? As it turned out, I did, thanks to Maria. Steve wasn't as adept a hacker as he believed. The FBI had already traced the hacking incident involving Jason back to a company, which coincidentally happened to be Steve's workplace. Following the conclusion of my conversation with the FBI, I wasted no time and contacted Steve's employer to file a complaint. I informed the manager about the ongoing hacking attempts on my accounts and expressed my strong belief that Steve was the perpetrator. Naturally, they did not take it too seriously, given my lack of concrete evidence. Little did they know that a special agent would be paying them a visit very soon. The ensuing week proved to be a nightmarish ordeal for Steve and Pepper. Pepper received the divorce papers, and her attorney was presented with all the evidence I had meticulously compiled. According to my lawyer, it constituted the most comprehensive investigation he had ever encountered. I possessed solid evidence of 40 instances of lateness and 19 documented absences, all directly associated with nights spent drinking with Steve. I had indisputable proof of their repeated abandonment of my daughter for extended periods. Maria even furnished me with a photograph taken at 2 a.m. on the eve of the emergency hearing, depicting Steve and Pepper engaged in drinking at a tattoo parlor. During that same hearing, Pepper arrived late and attributed her tardiness to a disability. Steve was served with the news that he had flagrantly violated the entire custody agreement. Maria had in her possession photographs I provided that clearly demonstrated his presence with Pepper on nights when the children were supposed to be under his care, left unsupervised. Furthermore, she possessed evidence of unauthorized communication between Steve and Pepper, a direct violation of the custody agreement. The repercussions were truly astonishing to witness. Steve lost his job. My complaint, coupled with an earlier hacking incident and the FBI's involvement, left his employers with no alternative but to terminate his employment. Although he managed to evade legal consequences since the FBI couldn't directly link him to the hacking, the reason for his dismissal became widely known, rendering him incapable of securing another IT position.